Welcome to the Nehemiah Entrepreneurship Community Podcast. I'm your host, Patrice Tsague. With us here in our studio, virtual studio, if you will, we have Mr. Steve Moore of the Murdock Trust and John Hart of Praxis. Gentlemen, welcome to our podcast.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
Good to be with you.
Well, thank you so much, gentlemen, for being here. John is out of New York City, but John, you're not in New York City right now. Where are you right now?
I'm in the middle of the country. I'm in Kentucky.
You are in Kentucky, and Steve is from Vancouver, Washington, and Steve is right now in Vancouver. Actually, Steve, you are in your office, correct?
I am in my office, yes.
Awesome. And when Steve came on, he had his face. That's right. He had his. So Steve is he's making sure that he's covered his mouth and his nose, and he's social distancing.
All the above.
Well, gentlemen, thank you for being here with us. So, Steve, tell us a little bit more about the Murdock Trust. How did it get started, and what is its purpose?
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Patrice, and thanks for being willing to let us join you. The Murdock Trust was founded in 1975 from the estate of Jack Murdock, who was a Northwest tech entrepreneur, was the co-founder of Tektronix, and the helped identify and launch what some people call the Silicon Forest, kind of the Northwest tech community. Helped spin a number of other businesses out of Tektronix and a variety of things like that. He died tragically in a plane crash in '71, and his estate went to create a trust that would nurture and enrich the educational, cultural, social, and spiritual life of individuals, families, and communities. He named 3 of his close friends as the trustees and charged them to carry forward that mission and then to identify their successor trustees. And so I think you've had some of our trustees on your shows and podcasts and things before. And so that's really the work that we do, is to try to fulfill that in the Pacific Northwest, primarily, though we work with a number of national organizations that have an impact into the Northwest. And then we also work in 4 sectors: arts and culture, health and human services, education, and science, research, and education. And we, our focus is really helping build the capacity of leaders and of organizations. And so many of those are faith-based organizations as well.
Steve, one of the reasons I want you guys here is because I want to talk about philanthropy and generosity and its impact around COVID-19. But before we get to it, you guys as a trust have been able to take a few $1 million, less than $100 million, and you guys have been able to multiply it to close over $1 billion today. Tell us, that's a marvelous story, while still giving away several $1 million a year. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, it's I think you in some ways have to talk about stewardship in connection with generosity, because our trustees have been great stewards over the years and made the decision early on to both grow the corpus or the endowment so that it would enable future giving while making giving a high priority in the present over these last 44 years or so. And so we've, that's you're exactly right. It was about 91 million when things started out. At year end last year, it was 1.4 billion, but who knows what it's worth today. It's one of the things. But the great thing is that in that same period of time, up until last December, there's been over $1 billion that's been invested. So it's a great story of stewardship and generosity. A lot of people that have gone before me, and a lot of work that's been done.
Jack Murdock will be proud today for the work you guys have, he'll be proud for what you guys have done. Well, so Steve, thank you, because Nehemiah has been a beneficiary of the Murdock Trust generosity. You guys, when you first met us, we were a much smaller organization. Because of your gift, it enabled us to just that, to build capacity. You put some fuel into our fundraising capacity that enabled us to get to where we are now. And we thank you for, you've done that for many other organizations. But Steve, you wanted John to join us today in the podcast. So why was it so important for you that John be a part of this podcast today? And what's your connection with John?
Yeah, that's a great question. To John's fortune or misfortune, he is engaged to my daughter, Megan. That's a fortunate thing. But the problem is that brings a father-in-law along with it, which is me. And so, but seriously, the reason is because John is a part of an organization that we've also partnered with, like Nehemiah Project, that is committed to social entrepreneurship. They work with nonprofits and with for-profits, helping entrepreneurs to succeed. And so we have also made grants, the capacity building grants at Praxis, because we see the work they're doing, particularly among young people, helping young people get inspired to be entrepreneurs. And I think if we've learned anything at all out of this COVID-19 crisis is that every leader and every organization is now a startup. Everyone is an entrepreneur. Everyone has got to figure out a new way of being in the world. And I just thought, you know, you'll get a lot more wisdom out of John than me. So that's why I thought it'd be great to have John on the calls, because he and the Praxis team have done and are doing, and just are thinking creatively and in so many ways. And I want people to know about groups like Nehemiah and Praxis and others that are really fueling that kind of thing.
John, that's a high endorsement from your father-in-law, brother. What have you done? You've done it right, my friend.
You know, we've it's obviously a gift to have somebody like Steve in your corner, just throughout all things in work and in life. You know, at Praxis, we started about 9 years ago, and I wasn't one of the original founders. I was kind of a first full-time employee that wasn't a founder. And I got to join two of the founders who were, you know, more pure-blooded entrepreneurs than I was. I didn't have to take quite as much risk as they did when they jumped out to start. There was actually a role for me, but it's been a real joy to kind of be on the journey with Dave and Josh, the two founders of Praxis, all this time, and be able to build something out and support a bunch of entrepreneurs.
Awesome. So, John, I took a look at your website. I'm familiar with Praxis. As a matter of fact, I think I got to know Praxis from the Trust several years ago. But I got a chance to go to your site in preparation for this podcast. And your site describes what you do as redemptive entrepreneurship. So what exactly is redemptive entrepreneurship?
Yeah, so, you know, when Dave and Josh started Praxis, they really were looking to support.
I'm sorry, John. I'm not sure why, but there's a little statics coming from your side over there. Yeah. So look to see what you can do to make it better so we can hear you a little bit better. It wasn't happening before. I'm not sure what just started now. So go ahead and start up again if you don't mind.
Let me see if I can switch headphones and see if that fixes it.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much. While John is doing that switch, you know, what really intrigued about Praxis, we talk about in Nehemiah biblical entrepreneurship, and but then this term redemptive entrepreneurship, which is leaning in the same direction, really innovative, and I wanted John to kind of get into what it's all about. So John, go for it.
How's this now?
No, that's much better.
That's better. Great. So, you know, we say that redemptive entrepreneurship is following a pattern of creative restoration through sacrifice. So creative, we kind of double down on that term because we think we're sort of created in the image of God. We're, you know, the Imago Dei, and we're invited to join him in the act of creating new things in the world. And restoration, we would say that is really putting things right. We know that the world is broken, the fall happened, but we believe that it doesn't end there, that our faith isn't just a ticket to, a fire insurance policy to get to heaven someday, but it actually calls us to act and be a part of God's restoration of all things in the here and now. And the term sacrifice is pretty important because we, following the call of Jesus, it's to actually do it for others first, instead of make things new and restore things for ourselves first.
I love it. John, you made me think about, we train our trainers in biblical entrepreneurship. We have this concept that we actually borrowed from my good friend, was in Washington, D.C., from the Faith, Works, and Economics, the leader. He wrote this book, and we borrowed this concept from him about the idea of the pillars, of the original pillars of God's kind of framework, the theology that now we call the theology of business, which is the fall, the first creation, the fall, and redemption and restoration. And we kind of look at its application on business, all of those. And you guys really take that part of redemption. So that then suggests, I love about it, because you make the assumption, not the assumption, you recognize that there was a creation, right? All things were made in order before, but then something happened. And now what you guys are trying to do is help people understand, how do we get back to pre-fall, right? Somebody listening said, John, how possible is that? Can business truly be redemptive, especially in this day and age? What would you say to that?
Yeah, well, we're pretty careful when we talk about this, and we use the term we pursue the redemptive pattern, and we're kind of on a journey. It's not a destination that we are ever going to arrive at, but there's kind of this idea that we would join God, try to seek what His vision for restoration of a certain sector or industry or a certain problem is, and say, what would a redeemed finance sector be like? What would a redeemed, restaurant industry, or a redeemed local economy, a redeemed arts, museum, or something like that, and just kind of, and then kind of go on a journey of pursuing it. The other thing that we do is kind of use a more meta narrative framework, thinking that most organizations end up in kind of three realms. One is a pretty exploitative realm, where the leaders are really living for themselves. They leverage culture because they don't care too much about what they make and what its impact is on the world. And they end up using people in the process. There's another group that's kind of more of an ethical vision, and they say, oh, that exploitative is not good, so I want to improve myself. And if I can improve myself, I can make the world a better place, and we can respect people in the process. But we think that there's actually something that goes beyond just an ethical vision, and that's kind of in that redemptive that we're actually trying to pursue. So we'll never get there in full, but there's a pursuit of it that we think is worthwhile.
Well said. I love it, and I do agree with you on that, my friend. Let's talk about COVID-19. So both organizations, both Praxis and Murdock Trust, are doing a lot of work around helping both entrepreneurs and nonprofits this time. So let's first talk about you guys. So Stephen, let's start with you. How has COVID-19 impacted the trust? And talk to us a bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of us as an organization, we did what every organization is trying to do, and that is to say, oh my gosh, what do we do now? And so we've tried to very seriously kind of stop and really think and to recognize that there are no maps that help us through this, but it does require good navigational tools. And there are good navigational tools that are available to us. And as persons of faith, even better, there are things that can go along with that. So the trust basically said, how do we respond to the most vulnerable in our communities and help those organizations and those leaders that are seeking to serve them? And so we really did that over the last few weeks in a series of what we call COVID-19 response grants. We started first with kind of two areas. One was scientific research, testing the kind of treatment that was available and the kind of working toward a vaccine. So we made a number of grants that are research oriented and that were related to supplies that were needed for that kind of work. Then we went to the next area, which was the groups that are working specifically frontline on things like food banks, shelters, emergency housing, things like that, hospitals, clinics, free clinics, etc. And so we did a number of grants in that area. And so we've been working our way through then with social service organizations like Salvation Army, the Catholic Charities, and a variety of groups. And then what we called community partnerships, groups like community foundations, nonprofit support organizations that are on the front lines around the Northwest. So we make a grant to them, and then they in turn can make a small grant to an organization in Spokane or Bozeman or Boise or Southern Oregon or, or Portland for that matter, Southwest Washington. So we've done 5 rounds, about 170 or so organizations. But in doing that, it's always an interactive process. And we learned that one of the real needs was that organizations, leaders, and their boards needed coaching. And so we have contracted with a number of outstanding organizational coaches, and we've made coaching available to leaders and organizations. That enables them to have really great counsel as they seek to figure out how to navigate going forward. And I know that last count, over 500 organizations have taken advantage of that.
Wow, I love it. And so how do these organizations find out about these resources? Is it pretty much per groups that you reach out to yourself, or can they go to your website and find out how to tap into it?
That's exactly it. I mean, we've heard from some of them because of our interactions with them. Some of them we've heard about through those community foundations, nonprofit support groups. Those nonprofit support groups are in fact also providing some coaching. So we know that there's a ripple effect, there's an ecosystem that we need to make sure is vibrant and robust and able to help respond. But people can go to our website as well. And on our website, they'll find that there are also webinars that are available on everything from, fundraising in a pandemic. There's 2 actually great seminars that have been done on that. There's been a few leadership things that have been done. There's a great one coming up this week that actually involve John's, the 2 people he's talked about earlier, Dave Blanchard and also Andy Crouch. And they're going to do one for leaders around the country on the whole issue of how do you lead at a time where there are no clear maps, and when you might call weather forecasting is not available, when we're in the midst of a weather crisis and there's not good weather forecasting. So that I would, people can just go on our website and sign up for that, or we can get information to them through you.
And what is the website, Steve? Could you provide it to the people for us?
Yeah, it's very simple. It's www.murdocktrust.org.
Awesome.
And
awesome.
They can go on that. Yeah.
If all fails, you can reach out to the Nehemiah office and we'll point our direction, but that's the direct path. So John, I noticed that, John, before we get into what you guys are doing, let's talk about how it's impacted Praxis. Before we started the podcast today, you were telling me you guys are based out of New York City and most of your staff are out of New York right now. So how has it impacted Praxis and how are you guys navigating?
Yeah, well, I think one of the hard things about being in New York City as this was unfolding is, I think we all realized that one of the best ways that we could kind of love our neighbors is not be around them. Just the sheer density of New York City is that way. And then when everything shut down, the only two places that were open kind of were grocery stores and the parks. And so if you could kind of remove yourself from being in grocery stores and in parks, that could be helpful in some way. So many of the team ended up leaving and kind of going to places in the country where they're from and things like that. And the team is, we've been working remote like everyone else for quite a while. But the team is doing well. It's just really interesting. I think all of us know somebody who's either passed away or certainly a number of people who have contracted the virus, at least 1 or 2 degrees of separation away.
But nobody from your team has been impacted directly.
Not directly. One team member's spouse had it and we were praying pretty hard because they were in a not good spot for a while, but made it. So.
Oh, awesome. And John, many businesses and nonprofits had to let go staff, downsize. Thank God, at Nehemiah we hadn't had to, but we've had a few payroll delays, because but we haven't had to let anybody go, thank God. What about you guys? How are you guys doing on that side?
Our staff has remained consistent right now. I think one of the things that we've written about, really honestly, with our portfolio of startups is that, one of the things every startup or every entrepreneur and every business nonprofit needs to do right now is think about conserving cash. In part because we don't know how long all of this is going to last and what's going to happen next. Our team has kind of used an analogy that there's sort of a blizzard phase of this, and a blizzard is really about kind of locking down. You can't go, you can't really see what's going to happen next, but usually a blizzard kind of lasts for a certain amount of time and then things go back to normal. A winter, of course, lasts for a longer period of time. But even a winter, there's a little bit of predictability about how to survive the winter. There's certain survival skills. And then there's what's called kind of a mini ice age. And our team has kind of been using that analogy internally as well as with our portfolio to say, we think that we all need to prepare for a mini ice age, and that, the amount of uncertainty about what's going to happen a year from now or 2 years from now is enough for all of us to kind of be thinking well about things like conserving cash and becoming essentialists in a time like this, as well as the ways that we need to pivot our sort of business or impact models to accommodate the new sort of realities of what the winter and what the mini ice age might mean.
Wow, good insight. So Steve, let's talk about philanthropy and generosity. So what is your sense? Has there been an increase or a decrease in generosity due to COVID-19? What are you sensing?
It's a great question, Patrice. And I don't know that we have enough data yet to really be able to tell, but my sense is that people have been more generous in a lot of different ways. People, like John said, it's an act of generosity to try to protect one another. That's a generosity of time and space. But I think what I see is that a lot of people want to be generous with their neighbor. When they see people that have lost a job or people that have been, ill or whatever, they want to be responsive. They want to be helpful in that way. And we're seeing that people are really wanting to give. But the thing I'd say is that I think that one of the things that we're also recognizing and realizing is this isn't a short-term thing. Mm-hmm. And so we all need to be thinking about being generous, but we also need to be thinking about being generous in over the long haul, because groups are going to need our help. Communities are going to need our help. Our neighbors are going to need our help going forward as well. And we've just got to be thinking about this more than just how do we get through 3 or 4 weeks, which it obviously has already gone past that.
So there's got to be some of a sustainable generosity approach. So, John, what's your sense?
I think one of the things that we have seen is a number of foundations have really stepped up and are doing a lot of effort to provide emergency response, kind of, sort of, going back to the analogy of the blizzard, the winter, and the mini ice age. Many of them are responding to the blizzard in incredible ways. And I just think that, and I think the Murdock Trust is one example, and the work that Steve and the trustees and the team have done there is just an incredible response in their initial sort of thing. I think what we're monitoring and really encouraging, especially our nonprofit portfolio to monitor, is what will happen over the next kind of 6 to 18 months after some of that initial stuff wears off and people become sort of tired of the winter. And are just like, whoa, we put a lot in at the beginning of this thing, but we can't sustain it. And I think there's, like Steve mentioned, there's some foundations that are thinking really well about a sustained amount of energy over time. And others, though, that I think have just responded a ton at the beginning, but they won't be able to sustain that response over time. And then I think there's just probably going to be some different allocations based on the new needs that are going to emerge as a result of all this.
Wow, great insight. I talked with a donor today, my routine donor call to make it was a routine thing. It's time for his commitment where I normally call and update him and said, are you going to be able to join us this year and in support? And he normally either say yeah or no, give me a number. Thank God it's been years so far, all these years. And he gave me an interesting response. First he asked me about our strategy for sustainability. He said, tell me again about, I've supported you guys for several years. Tell me where you are on that. And then I updated him. And then he said, he said, Patrice, we're going to do what we normally do for you guys this year. He said, in part, like to do more. He said, in part, what we've decided to do is not to pull back from any group that we've been supporting and to at least keep them where we have been. But then we've taken on other groups because we realize that there are some needs right now that needs our attention. And I thought that was an interesting response where, and by the way, he's a very generous guy. So the amount he normally gives us, not a bad amount. But I thought his response was interesting he says, you know what, it was a generous act. I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing because I know you need it. There's no time to pull back. But I've taken on other things and other folks because I realize that they have great needs right now because at least you guys have an economic engine, others do not. Steve, what do you think about that response? I thought that was an interesting response from a donor.
I think that was an incredible response. And my guess is people would like to get his name, Patrice. The thing I'd say that's really brilliant about it is that he's leaning in, or they're leaning in. And I think that's the thing that's so important. And, one of the things that we said to our team, we're going to try to get by not making cuts to full-time staff, but we also want to all be more generous. Let's figure out ways that we can be more generous because in some ways the gift that we can give to the communities is to keep some people working. And I know that a lot of people have worked at keeping people working and just redeploying people in a variety of ways to really keep them working and then encouraging them to be generous. That's an important, and it's a difficult balancing act. It's a difficult kind of thing to determine because, as John mentioned, conserving cash is a key principle for any nonprofit, any business right now. And it's, it's often the important time to really to do some things you've been needing to do, take care of some business. But it's also important to kind of take the big picture view. And I've talked with a couple of business leaders, one that was in last Friday, that we were on a call together and that just had taken that approach as well and just said, come on, folks, we're going to keep you going, but we really want to invest in our community. Let's all take responsibility to do that.
I love it. John, on your website, you did kind of what we did. You have a COVID-19 resource center. Ours is on our e-community platform. Yours is actually on the website, forward facing for all to see. Like Murdock, that means that you guys have been proactively have a COVID-19 response. So let's talk about it. What does that look like? What have you guys done in terms of trying to help your entrepreneurs around this time?
Yeah, I think early on, one of the insights from our team was that, there's probably 10% of businesses and nonprofits that are actually going to have an incredible new opportunity. So this platform that we're on right now, Zoom, is one that has a whole new market that just opened up for them because of this. There's probably 10% that are like completely gone overnight and they can't do anything about it. And the other 80% of organizations basically lost their business model overnight, but have an opportunity to do something different and to find a way to respond. And so we sort of very quickly as a team organized ourselves into a couple of different working groups and did some 2-week design sprints to try and get some new things out there to support our community of entrepreneurs. One of them was that resource site. One of them was to launch a community platform on Slack so that all of our community could talk with one another and share resources, different things like that, as well as publishing a couple of pieces. One was a Praxis Journal piece called Leading Beyond the Blizzard that I kind of referenced the framework that we used in there earlier. And so that's some of the stuff that we've done. And that Leading Beyond the Blizzard piece, I think, reached a much broader audience than we typically reach, because we primarily write to our audience, which is a community of entrepreneurs, about 200 folks and about 500 folks in our investor and philanthropic networks. So,
wow.
John, is that article up on your website? Where would people find the Leading Beyond the Blizzard?
Yeah, it's on the Praxis Journal, which is just at journal.praxislabs.org.
Awesome. And then John, so to get more information about Praxis, they would go to, I'm sure they go there, but that's narrow. What's the broad website?
Praxislabs.org. So praxislabs.org.
Awesome. Gentlemen, you guys have been wonderful. My last question to you both. Actually, I got 2 more. Let me see if I can get to both of them real quick. Let me actually start with this one. I didn't want to ask it, but I think I should. Our nation is leading the way in stimulus, $2.5 trillion so far. Great. We need it. We applied for it. All entrepreneurs, many businesses need right now, but it does present a long-term fiscal issue. So from your perspective, how do we process this? What is our responsibility as entrepreneurs of the nation beyond the stimulus to make sure that the fix doesn't create a long-term pain?
Yeah, sort of the cure is worse than the illness kind of thing.
You got it.
Yeah. So I think that I'll offer just 2 very quick thoughts. One is that it's difficult because the reality is, as we all know, that a portion of the money did not get to the right places. A portion of it went to the wrong places. That's just part of what happens when you do a quick, big fix on things. But the second thing is that it helped keep in place critical infrastructure of the business community, which is the driving force for all other presences in the community, whether it be even healthcare, even nonprofits, and you just think of all other sectors. The business community is the business engine, the model. So it's a critical thing. We need to pray for our leaders and just thank them for working hard. Are they making some mistakes? Yeah, I guarantee I'm making some mistakes. And my guess is everybody else is making mistakes. There'll be a lot of Monday morning quarterbacking going on this, but the reality is everybody's trying to do the best they can. And we've got to honor and we're going to all have to do the best we can going forward. And it's going to be a unique challenge without a doubt.
John, good insight. there, Steve.
Yeah, I think that what Steve said is very, very right. And, you know, one of the things we talk about is just the amount of grace that we need to give in this season to others and to ourselves. The only way that we can be able to move through a season like this is to cultivate some sort of inner resilience and find ways to creatively respond to what's going on. So, you know, when you think about the stimulus and things like that, it's, you know, it's there in some ways to help some of these things stay afloat, but nobody is going to be able to just keep doing what they were doing before. So staying afloat is one way to kind of survive the winter, but what's going to happen next? People are going to have to really double down on innovation and coming up with new solutions. And what we're calling, we're naming this to our portfolio, we're calling it designing for a different future, and really trying to lead people into that. But you can't design for a different future unless you're willing to make mistakes, and you can't make mistakes if you can't give yourself and others grace in that process. And the other thing we've been talking about is really talking about the connection between lament and hope, and the real need to lament and grieve some of the things that we've all lost. I mean, there's people that have spent their entire lives building businesses, nonprofits, art museums, cultural institutions that have just disappeared overnight. You know, summer camps, the list goes on and on and on. And we need to be able to name and take the time to grieve and lament some of these things that are legitimate losses in this season before we can just move on and start building the new future that I think we need to be able to do.
That is good stuff, John. We released a devotion today called, normally called Pursue and Recover All. Today we called it Don't Pull Back. And in that we use the story of Ziklag. David, when he lost, well, first he was facing tremendous humiliation, and then he came back to his Ziklag and found it destroyed, children and wives taken, and I mean, he just wept like a baby, you know. And then, but he had to recover. He had to, you know, pull himself together and sought the Lord and say, should I pursue? Should I recover? Good point. It's hard to pursue and recover if you don't first mourn over what you've lost, so that you can pursue and recover from a healthy posture. I like that. Gentlemen, you've been so gracious. So our last question to you, this was really a 45 minutes of insight and advice to both entrepreneurs and nonprofit leaders. But your last words. So what advice would you give? And you may have repeated something you already said, because you said a lot of it. Would you give to entrepreneurs and nonprofit leaders right now as they consider how to, you know, the nation's about to open up and they have to now go out of quarantine, however slowly, and they have to face the winter, John? And what advice would you give them on how to navigate this next season and to do it successfully? Let's start with you, John. We're going to close with Steve.
You know, we've written 2 pieces about this to our community that have a lot more to say than I have time for here. So I think we can point folks to those, because I do think this is more than just kind of 30 seconds of advice that you probably want. But you know, I do think one of the things is to really get good at prototyping. If you are not familiar with that concept, you know, every great entrepreneur in the beginning, they have to learn how to prototype and be able to do it in sprints to really learn what their market is, what the new realities of that market are, and be able to adapt quickly. So that's one that I just say for businesses that are having to sort of face a new reality is learn prototyping and be able to do it in sprints and organize your team around whole new sort of different opportunities that you see out there.
And John, for them to get those resources you mentioned, where would they go?
They're all on our website, just praxislabs.org. I think there's a link to some of the COVID response pieces.
Awesome. Steve, you have the last word, my friend. What's your
Wow.
advice?
I loved your study, by the way, Patrice. I think that is fantastic, and what John said as well. I think in closing, I'd say seek wise counsel. Make sure that you're not all inside your own head. The second thing I would say is to take care of your soul, your heart, and your mind. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not to your own understanding. In all your ways, acknowledge him. He'll direct your paths. So I think, nurture, take care of your own soul, take care of your family, keep your priorities straight. The priorities being straight always helps guide going forward. The last thing I'd say is you ought to join that Zoom convening with Andy Crouch and Dave Blanchard this Thursday. And so that'd be my last thing to say is I think it'd be a great follow-on to this conversation.
Let's do it. And where would they get more information on that, Steve? Is it on Praxis, on your site, or both?
It may be on both, but you can get it off the Murdock Trust website and just go to COVID-19 response on the Murdock Trust website, and the link to sign up for that Zoom convening with Andy and Dave is there.
And I'm going to assume that it's free, correct?
It is free.
We're gonna push it out on Wednesday to our tribe and see if as many of them can get to it as possible.
That's fantastic.
Well, Steve, John, you've been kind and generous. Speaking of the theme, thank you so much to you both. Let me leave you guys with this in our audience. Wow, what an incredible tag team. As they've shared with us how we can navigate this season, the insights and encouragement. I don't know about you, but I was sure enough blessed. So let me leave you this word. If you want more information about how we can come alongside you through training, coaching, and access to capital, and walk with you in community to help you build that kingdom company, go to that next level, so that we together can transform the world, go to our website, nehemiahecommunity.com. But let me leave you with this prayer. May the Lord bless you. May the Lord enable you to be faithful what is given you, so that one day you can hear those wonderful words, well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful over a few things. He'll make you rule over much. God bless you.